So for the last almost 130 years, we've celebrated women in the workforce at Gibson, and they've participated in not only developing some of those banner models, but building them during wartime when men were sent off to war, and just an amazing fleet of female luthiers developed as a result of that.
A lot of the builders are always visualized as men, but the fact is, during the 1940s, that is a time when women took over a lot of the industries in America. Now, the influence of that was crucial, because if anybody knows about the history of Gibson, you know that the J45 is one of our most famous models. And that was introduced in 1942 by the women builders of Gibson, the Gibson Gals they were called in the history books. Not only did they release the most precious Gibson Acoustics ever made, they also put this banner on it that collectors love. It says only a Gibson is good enough. So the banner Gibson Acoustics that collectors cherish and covet were built by the women builders of Gibson at that time. Today, Gibson women are building Gibsons along with the men here.
I like to think that, their finer touch and just probably more rational approach to instrument making overall makes those instruments even more special.
Scraping is the process where, now that that binding has been painted, we have to remove the paint over the binding without compromising the paint on the wood. Very hand intensive, very, very detail-oriented process. The people that work in here have to have the patience that I could never have. And they utilize tools that we've created, tools that we found at work that aren't necessarily originally developed for this process.
The guitars in this room come from the color spray department. So they've just had all the color sprayed on them, and because they were hanging on the hook, the whole thing was sprayed, which means there's all kinds of parts that weren't supposed to be sprayed that have color on them, and they're really fine, narrow little bits of binding here. And so we use X-Acto blades and microscope slides.
One of our main tools we use is a microscope glass slide. We use that to scrape the ribs, tops, and backs. Another tool we like to use is an X-Acto knife, and we use that to scrape the rosette and the neck. But mainly those are our two main tools, are the X-Acto knife and the glass slide.
The amazing thing is, you look at a row of Gibson guitars, a wall of Gibson guitars, every white line you see on those bodies has been hand cut back in. And they get it so clean, so precise. It's always fascinated me. It's a job I could never do, but they do such a great job. It's clean, just gives that guitar that really crisp appearance that only scraping done correct will give you.
Some parts of it are like masked off for a little bit, but there's still quite a bit of color that goes underneath the edge of the masking. There's a little bit of masking on the rosette, which covers a little bit, but basically all it does is tell me where it is. So at the end of the day, we have piles of scrapings, on the floor, on the chair, everywhere that we've scraped off the guitars. But like I said, we do the rosette, we do the top, we do the back, we do the ribs, and the neck.
Not only do they scrape the binding, on the peg heads of guitars that have inlays, the inlay was masked with a mask matching the shape of that particular Gibson logo or crown or whatever, but you always get some misting of paint around that masking. So they will go in and with X-Acto knives and they will clean that up, making sure that inlay on the peg head is as clean and crisp as they can possibly get it.
It's not an easy job to learn because you're not allowed to uncover any wood that's been colored. You can only scrape on the plastic.
One of the biggest challenges we have as a scraper is the fact that it does take many, many months to master, and people really want to do good right away. So we do have a lot of trial and error in the beginning.
When scrapers start, number one, there are some instruments that are easier to scrape than others. and some parts of the instrument that are easier to scrape than others. So we will give them the opportunity to work on guitars without really tight waists, without a lot of really sharp curves, and let them learn their skills, hone their skills on easier parts of instruments and easier instruments, and then gradually morph them into doing J200s, LOOs, other tight-waisted instruments and such.
The way we scrape guitars has changed over the years. In the past, we've had one person scrape the entire guitar and then send it on. But changing the process just a little bit, we found that if one person scrapes the more technical, harder parts of the guitar, and then a different person scrapes the bulk of the guitar, by doing it that way, it streamlines the training process, and it also gets more guitars out the door into people's hands.
But once we have scraped the color off the binding and exposed all the binding, then it goes into the next room, and then they put the antiquing on.
Last episode, we talked a little about antiquing. Once the scraping is completed throughout the entire instrument, it'll go into a booth that's called our antiquing booth. Antique is a spray product that just gives the guitar a little bit of a patina. Now, we use various antiquings on various parts of our product line, but what it does is it takes the white plastic products such as the rosette, and even the inlay on the peg head in some cases, and the binding, and just gives them a little bit of an older look out of the box. The antiquing process is just trying to emulate the effect age has on the plastics and nitrocellulose that were used back in the day. Once the antiquing process is completed, there are segments of our line that do not get inlays on the peg head, be it historic, like say for example the banner year historics, some of our studios, the G collection. Instead of a Gibson logo inlay on the peg head face, they will get a decal. Once the decals are applied, guitars are inspected. We want to make sure once again that before we move into the clear coat process, which is very time consuming, very expensive, we want to make sure the guitars are ready to receive it. So inspection is the name of the day. Once all these processes are done, again, we've talked about the antiquing, the scraping, the inspections. The guitar is good to go into the spray booth to receive their coats of lacquer.
I try to be humble, so I try not to brag about being here, because, we should be humble. But this is an awesome place to work, and it's nice to know that we have a small part in building the only Gibson Acoustic in the whole world.